Yes.
My Lord, we're going to commence with the architectural evidence that we had spoken about earlier. And my Lord, as you can see from the large pieces of paper that are floating around, this presents a few challenges. My Lord, I wonder if I may, before the witness is sworn in, whether I can hand up certain exhibits.
Yes.
Mr. Savage, for the moment, you may take a seat. My Lord, I understand that already with you are the exhibits. Can I check? Is it with His Lordship? I beg your pardon. Perhaps my attorney can hand up your copy of the plans. I don't see Anthony, but perhaps...
This document here, this thing?
These are the building plans of John Vorster Square, Your Lordship.
Oh, goodness.
We thought that you might be able to put it on the chair that is next to you.
Is it only this one page, or will I have to flip over?
Unfortunately, there are 7 pages.
Couldn't we get a A4 size of this?
My Lord, in due course, we can provide you with A3 copies, but for purposes of explanation, they would be way too small. But for purposes of filing, we can provide you with reduced A3 versions.
Yeah, I think they will have to come in at some point, because when I have to go and work with this, it's going to be, it won't be practical. I mean, how will I be able to prepare judgment flipping through this?
Yes, yes, indeed. You won't be able to, and we will provide you with reduced versions.
Yes.
My Lord, together with the plans, there is an index to the plans. It should be clipped on the plans. Perhaps Anthony can assist you with that. My Lord, with your leave, we'd like to create a new volume for the architectural evidence, volume M.
Yes.
And volume M comprises of the following items. Firstly, M1 is the curriculum vitae of the architect Colin Woodall Savage.
Yes, sorry, just 1 minute. Yes.
And my Lord, that should be directly under the index that you have. Then, my Lord, we have 3 photocopied photographs taken from the Times Live newspaper. And there are 3 of them, and they're marked M2, M3, and M4. Lord, do you have those 3 photocopied photographs?
Yes, I have them here. When was this photo taken?
Lord, I must say that we only discovered these last night, and we are grateful to Mr. Savage's partner, Heather Dodd, who found these while doing Google searches for photos of John Vorster Square. And it will be the evidence of Mr. Savage when we put questions to him that this photograph accords with the original plans of the exterior and landscaping of the outside as per the plans drawn up in the early 1960s. And it is one of the best photographs we have as to how the impact site would have looked in 1971.
Yes. Yes.
And then, my Lord, the balance of the exhibits are the actual building plans. Now, I can advise, my Lord, that the Department of Building Works supplied us with several hundred building plans, and we have whittled several hundred down because we didn't think you wanted to wade through several hundred building plans, so we've whittled it down to just 7. So Exhibit M5 is what's referred to as the garden plan. It's dated November 1961, and there were additions made in August 1964. I'll just take your Lordship through what we have, and then we will return to the plans.
Yes.
The next plan, which is marked M6, is also a garden plan. And, my Lord, that plan reflects adjustments to the outside, to the garden. And that plan is dated 1979. And then those adjustments, which we'll take you through, were then affected in the years later, probably the early 1980s. My Lord, Exhibit M7 is one of the smaller plans, and it deals with what's called the Waghuis, the guardhouse. And my Lord might recall on the inspection in loco seeing a smallish building located just to the right of the impact site, perhaps about maybe 25 meters away. And that is dated 31st October 1979. And it will be the evidence of our expert that construction would have happened in the early 80s. My Lord, M8 is a floor plan of the 9th floor, and that is dated November 1961 with certain additions in May of 1964. And so we are confident that that plan reflects what the 9th floor looked like in the 1970s. My Lord, Exhibit M9, this is when we move to the 10th floor. And with the leave of the court, we're going to change the order here because M10, Your Worship, at least Your Lordship, is a floor plan that does reflect the as-built structure as originally built. So we will start with M10 rather than M9. And we will then move to M9, which is a fuller floor plan of the 10th floor. And then finally, my Lord, M11 is the roof plan, the very top of the southern wing. My Lord, now that we have dealt with the exhibits with your leave, we call our next witness Mr. Colin Woodall Savage, and I'd be grateful if he could be sworn in.
Yes.
Your full name and surname?
My name is Colin Woodall Savage.
Do you have any objection in taking the oath?
No, I don't.
Do you swear that the evidence that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. You may be seated, please, if you want to. Yes.
Mr. Savage, firstly, the legal team and the Timol family are very grateful for the time that you have provided in order to consult with the legal team on 2 occasions and to take time out your busy practice to provide expert testimony to this inquest court. Mr. Savage, in order to establish your credentials and expertise, I just want to take you through aspects of your curriculum vitae. And my Lord, I must apologize because I think I overlooked Exhibit M1, which is Mr. Savage's CV, which hopefully is before you. Mr. Savage, perhaps to save time, I'm just going to put a few of the highlights on your CV to you, and you can just confirm the correctness thereof. You have a B. Arch from the University of Cape Town in 1978.
That is correct.
You're the member of certain professional bodies, including the member of the Pretoria Institute of Architects, the South African Institute of Architects, and you're also a registered architect with the South African Council of Architects.
That is correct.
You are a member of certain boards and committee. You're a member of an organization called Social Housing Focus Trust, SHIFT.
That is correct.
Just very briefly, what does that organization do?
It's a group of people who have come together to assist or focus onto social housing as a particular housing type that's new to, well, it was new to South Africa when we did focus onto it. It's obviously now much further down the line.
Thank you. And you're also a founder member of the Built Environment Support Group at the University of Natal, Durban.
Correct, yes.
You've practiced architecture. I see from your CV you established a firm, Colin Savage's Architect, based in Durban in 1980.
Correct.
And then you relocated to Johannesburg in 1988.
Correct.
You also have been involved in academics. You were a part-time lecturer at the University of Natal from 81 to 87, and Wits University from 88 to 2007.
Correct.
You're the author of numerous published works. They look impressive. I'm not going to take you through those journal articles.
Thank you.
And you've also been awarded a number of awards for particular buildings that you have been responsible for designing. Correct. And too many to deal with, so apologies, I'm not going to take you through those either. My Lord, I should say that I've spoken to my colleagues, and these building plans have been handed in by consent. And in due course, we will submit an affidavit from the Department of Public Works. My Lord, with your leave, I would now like to turn to the building plans. And because of the size of these plans, we thought that it would be helpful if two of my colleagues held up a plan, and perhaps your assistant, as needs be, can ensure that you're also looking at the relevant plan that is being considered. So, my Lord, the first plan is M5, and it's titled the Garden Plan. And as mentioned, this plan dates back to November of 1961, and it was adjusted in August of 1964. And my Lord, I'm hoping that your copy has certain markers on it. There should be an orange marker which indicates where room 1026 will be, or rather is, in relation to that southern wing. While we believe that this particular plan is very useful, is because of its date. And Mr. Savage, if I may now ask you to start assisting the court, could you explain to the court what this plan illustrates, and perhaps you may want to point the court, as you're pointing out the southern wing and the garden and its features, you may wish to also make use of these photographs that your partner generously provided.
I will do that, my lord. I just want to make one point of correction. It's not called a garden plan, it's called a site plan.
Right.
Okay, do I need to refer to the date and how the date has been inserted onto the plan?
Yes, please, Mr. Savage.
In any architectural plan, we need to refer to when the original plan was drawn, when it was issued for various kind of changes, and that is generally recorded on the drawing title, either at the bottom or on the side of that plan. This particular one has the last entry here purely for the telephone. It's August of 1964. But unfortunately, there's no reference to when the original plan was generated.
But because of its date, are you confident that this reflects what was what the building looked like in 1971?
Correct. I'm very happy with that.
To assist you, we found a slightly longer ruler if this would help you pointing out.
Thank you. That would help. My apologies. I was meant to bring a stick. Thank you. Okay. Now we need to refer to the drawing specifically, and we need to focus onto this area of the building, which is the southern elevation of the building, and it shows where that wing of the building, which is relevant to the case, sits in relation to a piece of garden that then sits in front of that building, that has it reflects its original shape and position.
And Mr. Savage, can you explain to the court how it was that you were able to mark room 1026 with some precision?
Okay,
the positioning?
It's quite difficult to get any reference points on the building that says where the pieces of structure are, so we needed to refer to a further plan. That then assisted us in getting...
Mr. Savage, I don't want to cause chaos here. Let's wait until we get to that plan,
right.
and we can revisit that
I'll
question.
refer to that later.
Yes.
But specifically, we were able to identify that point along the building by looking at these photographs that assisted us with a lot of interpretation where that position is on the photograph. This do we need to refer to the which photograph this one is?
Yes. Are you looking at yes, it is M2. But I see that you did a certain measurement on the second photo, M3.
Yeah, let's do that, M3. That's correct.
My Lord, so, do you have M3? It's a second photograph.
It's a smaller photograph. And on that photograph, we were then able to identify I think it was the fourth office along from the corner of the building. That was where that person was being held in the building, and we were then able to dimension that according to this plan here, which is 13 meters from the corner of the building.
And the dimensions, were there any complications with those that are on the plans?
The original plans were done as an imperial scale. The current plans that we have also got are imperial scale. our metric scale. Now, that happened at a period of time during the course of when these plans were prepared and when ultimately the alternative or the changes to those plans were done, which was in the 70s and 80s in the latter part of the last period.
Thank you. Perhaps, Mr. Savage, these photographs, do they reflect the plans that we're currently looking at? In particular, the face of the southern wing and the garden or lawn, together with what looks like a small barrier or retaining wall.
If we look at photograph number M4, which is the largest of the three photographs, it's easier to refer to the pavement in front of this wing of the building and showing as a point of reference people walking along the pavement that gives a degree of scale to and size to that wall. Because that was one thing we were struggling to find. There's no note on the drawing here that says what height that wall is until we discovered this photograph that then describes exactly that wall size. And if you look at the person's leg here, it's about at knee level, which is the position of that wall as it steps down the pavement.
So, Mr. Savage, in terms of meters or centimeters, what would your estimate be of that wall?
It's about 75 centimeters, or 750 millimeters to be.
And so,
Exactly.
in your view, because of that height, it could be easily stepped over by an adult person?
Very easily.
Including persons perhaps carrying a stretcher. It wouldn't have posed much of an issue for them?
Very easy. Would pose no problem at all for people to actually get across and to pass whatever they needed to do from the garden to the pavement edge.
And Mr. Savage, looking at what they call the lawn section, would that have been flat terrain? Would it have been completely flat from that wall through to the edge of the building?
My lord, there would be certain kind of small changes as the landscaping might have introduced to it, but there's nothing more radical than maybe a slight slope to that garden or to that lawn. But there's nothing of major kind of change to the lawn position and shape.
That small wall there, standing this side of the street, would it obscure vision to the ground level of that garden?
Would it obscure, sorry?
Any vision to the ground floor of that garden? I'm talking about this picture now.
Yeah.
Yes. When one's standing where the cameraman was standing, for example.
That level there is the ground floor of this wing of the building.
No, not the building. I'm talking about, we are still on the garden.
Correct?
You see, there is a wall there next to where these people are passing.
Correct?
Now, the height of that wall is such that it obscures vision to the ground level of that garden.
My lord, if you look at the growth behind the wall, or sitting,
Yes.
what seems to be on top of the wall, that reflects the level of the ground behind that wall.
How does that happen? I'm not, look, I have no idea how tall are these shrubs above the ground, because I don't see the ground there. Or are you able to see?
I'm suggesting that represents the line of the garden behind the wall, and this is where the plants were positioned in such a way that they don't sit below that line of the wall, they sit behind the wall.
I don't know if you understand. what I'm talking
My Lord, can I rephrase your question,
Yes.
because I think it's a critically important
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Sure.
Mr. Savage, if there was a body lying approximately 3 meters from the edge of the building, and you were standing halfway across the road, because of the height of the wall, would I be right in saying that the vision of that body would be obscured, or in fact you wouldn't see the body. You would have to be standing pretty much close to that wall to see over it.
If those people along the road were looking into that garden, they would be able to see anything that's lying in that garden.
But if somebody was perhaps, and I can only estimate here,
This side of the street.
on the other side of the
Yeah,
street.
no, I understand that. I'm coming to that. But if from the other side of the street, that the planting sitting on that terrace does obscure some of the visibility of what might be lying on the ground of that piece of garden.
What about this wall here, the small wall here?
This wall here,
Yes.
I'll repeat what I said earlier, which is I believe that the garden is kept, and that's the reason for that wall, was that it was acting as a retaining function. In other words, the garden was sitting very close to the level of that, the top of that wall running all the way down.
Still don't get what I'm trying to establish. A person is standing, let's say where the person who took this camera, this photo, the camera.
Correct?
If I'm standing where he was standing, which will be this side of the street, I
Correct.
think, right? Will I be able to see the soil on that other side of the wall?
From this position on the other side of the wall?
Yes, from where? From this side.
No, you wouldn't be.
I'm indebted to your lordship. On that score, Mr. Savage, do you recall a building called the Dollars Filling Station? It was a garage and panel beaters.
Across the road from where this photograph was taken?
So your recollection is that it's directly across the road?
Correct. It's directly, as in to the left of this photograph as we're looking at it. In other words, we're looking at it like that, to the left of it.
Yes, yes. Thank you for pointing
Okay.
that out. Just in terms of other features, there appears to be some kind of, if a layperson were looking at this this line over here, one would suggest that it was another wall. And for that purpose, I want to refer you to the photograph album. You have a copy, my lord, it's volume
Yep.
F. I don't know whether your assistant can
What
provide you with
page would it
volume
be
F.
on?
And so, unfortunately, the pages are not numbered, but it's photographs 141 to 146. Anthony is not here. I don't know who can assist you.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
You say it's M.
It's volume
Exhibit
F.
Volume F.
It's the album that was compiled by Warrant Officer J.M. Kruger.
Yes, and to what pages?
Sadly, that album is not numbered. It's really something that should have been numbered. But it's photo 146.
Right, there it is there.
Mr. Savage, you'll notice from these photographs, it depicts the wall as it looks now. There's another retaining wall where the small garden is behind. And then there is what appears to look like a gutter.
Correct.
We have been advised by the police that in fact it's not a gutter but a light well.
Correct.
Because there are windows there that front onto the basement. And my question to you, Mr. Savage, is that light well, what appears to be a gutter on the right-hand side, structurally, after examining these plans, has that changed over time?
No,
No.
not at all.
Thank you. So I think that's an important note to take, that gutter, which is made of concrete and has two sharp edges, has always been there from the moment that building was constructed. While we are dealing with, I know I shouldn't refer to it as the garden plan, but for us the garden,
Site plan.
the site plan, but the garden for us is the most important part of this. there's certain vegetation that is visible in that garden, Mr. Savage. In fact, there's quite a bit of vegetation. There's some bushes, but there's also an interesting looking tree that is standing up. It's a small, narrow tree.
In this photograph?
Yes. So if I had to count the panels from the right-hand side of the building, and it helpfully is between the two of the individuals walking in the direction of the double-decker highway. From the edge of the building, that tree would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 panels away from the edge of the building, that big concrete corner of the building.
Are you on M3?
M3.
I was looking
Yes.
at M4, which is the blown-up version of this photograph.
Yes.
It is the same photograph, Your Lordship, but I'd suggest looking at M4 for this purpose because it is bigger than the others. And I suppose it's also roughly, give or take, 13 meters from the edge of the right-hand side of the building.
Correct.
Now I'd like to point you to a few more photographs. If we go to 141, which also shows the light well. You'll see there's a palm tree in that photograph. Anthony, if you're back, could you get his Lordship volume F, the photo album? Oh, he's got it. And I think also helpful photographs would be 144 and 145. Mr. Savage, we can't say for sure if it is the same tree. But in your view, is it possible or likely, looking at the photographs, the more modern photographs, and then looking at the older photograph, that it's probable that it is the same tree?
It possibly is. I agree with your statement.
Yes. And in terms of its positioning, would it...
In terms of its positioning, it's exactly in the same position as what this original photograph depicts or shows, being 13 meters off the edge of the corner of the building.
Yes. Your Lordship, in order to finish up with this particular plan, I want to point out that this portion of the building, and Your Lordship will notice that this portion is referred to as portion 2. Mr. Savage, I see there are 2 entrances to this building. Could you point out to His Lordship those 2 entrances, one for Europeans and one for non-Europeans?
The main entrance is sitting to the right-hand side of the plan. In other words, on the east side of the building is here, and the non-European entrance is sitting on the opposite side of the plan, from the western side of the building.
Thank you. And then to the right of the European entrance, there appears to be a driveway and a lawn, but this plan does not reflect another building situated where that driveway and lawn is.
Correct.
My Lord, if we can move to the next plan, which is Exhibit M6. And on the index, we have referred to this also as a garden plan. But now this date, is 1979. Mr. Savage, unfortunately, the copying of these plans seems to have obscured the date, or unless I'm missing the date. But can you advise the court how it is that we know that this particular plan dates from 1979?
My Lord, there are other plans done by the same company that give better reference to dates, and which I know would have been done by them as the entrance building. Are you referring to this building here specifically?
No, I'm referring to how we know that this plan
the general kind of layout of this plan done by that company.
So what you're saying is that from those other plans dealing with the Wachthuis or guardhouse,
correct.
That's dated 79, so by logical deduction, because this sets out the plan of 79 and the palisade fencing, it must be also.
Yes. Do you want to refer to those plans?
It's okay, we're going to get to them shortly. Let's
Okay.
keep it the order that we're in. Now, Mr. Savage, can you point out the big differences between this 1979 plan and the 1961 plan when it comes to the garden outside the south wing, the retaining wall or barrier, and what appears to be an addition to the site where the driveway existed previously?
My Lord, the issue here, let's start with the garden first, or the grassed area.
Yeah.
Originally, it was up to that point, parallel with that line, which was following that line to there, and came out to a point roughly in that position over there. What has been modified is that this has been reduced back, chamfered the corner to enable a pathway to be achieved all the way around the building as a result of the new palisade fencing being put around the boundary of the site as a result of security issues around the building that was introduced at that time.
And if we can just pause there for a moment, my Lord, if I can refer you to photo 146 of the photo album Exhibit F. That photo, 146, in fact, from 146 all the way to 150, gives a pretty good indication of the palisade fencing, which is now much taller, as well as the pathway referred to by Mr. Savage.
Photograph number 148 is the top photograph, 149 the bottom one. This one, first of all, 48 refers to the size of the wall. Exactly the position of that I couldn't really tell you, but the other one, 149, indicates a photograph taken on the inside of the palisade fence, showing that pathway that I was referring to running along here, and it's probably taken roughly in this position, looking in that direction.
And that palisade fencing is now quite high in your estimation, approximately how high?
Oh, it's in the order of about 3 meters.
Thank you. and Mr. Savage, to the right of that southern wing, there appears to be the site of a new building. Can you point to that new building?
The new building is positioned here, where the original driveway, which was positioned over there, that building is now sitting in that position, and the new palisade fence is taken up to the edges of that building on both of the sides of that building.
If this plan was dated 1979, in your estimation, when would have construction started?
I think that date is referring to quite late in the year of 1979. Just let's have a look here. No, this is a plan of that particular building that I was referring to, and it has a date on the bottom of it.
Just pause for a moment. So, my Lord, we've now moved to a smaller plan. It's Exhibit M7. And we've titled it Entrance Stroke Waghuis Plan. Please proceed, Mr.
It's called a Waghuis plan on the plans. Its date is 31st of the 10th, 1979, and was probably meaning that the building was built in the year following that, because that takes the date very close to the end of the year, which is not a very good time to actually start any construction. That would need to go to tender, evaluation, etc., etc. So it would definitely go on to the following year, which is 1980.
Thanks. And does this plan also reflect the palisade fencing?
On the south answer, or Saint answer, south elevation, there's a palisade fence shown on the side here that also gives some indication of its height.
Thanks. We don't need to interrogate that more. And
No.
I see that the palisade fencing continues on the other side. of
There
the
you
building
go.
as well.
So, but this also refers to plans that are giving more detail in relation to that palisade fence on another section of the plans.
Yes. My Lord might recall this small building on the inspection. Part of it is now actually used as a recruiting office, and I imagine the balance is a guardhouse. We can now move to the next plan. So that would be Exhibit M8. And my Lord, this depicts the 9th floor. Perhaps, Mr. Savage, you can explain why this plan is very useful in terms of reflecting the situation in 1971.
Because we didn't have the plan for the following floor, which is the 9th floor. This is the 9th floor.
This is the 9th floor.
This is the 9th floor. The 10th floor. It is the one above this. Is that correct?
Correct.
We don't have that plan, so in order to give some indication of what the layout of the building was like as a general kind of layout, this plan gives a good reference as to where things like positions of staircases, how the two wings are then linked together, how the passages are then controlled at various points of access, entering and exiting, all of those aspects of the building.
Thank you. And for the record, this plan was drawn up in November of 1961. That should, I think, be on the top right-hand corner.
Correct. Sorry, note. So, yes, position, yeah, there we go. The first reference to the first issue of revision is 1961.
Yes.
November.
Now, where would this floor plan be facing? Where's the south?
The south would always be, as a point of understanding how plans are drawn, south is usually at the bottom of the drawing, north is at the top of the drawing. That's how the points of the compass are orientated on a plan.
So this is still the south face.
Correct, which would be that face of the building, the southern face of the building, facing towards the south. That's the north side.
But why this particular plan is useful is that in relation to portion 2 of the John Vorster Square complex, it includes the 2 wings joined by what appears to be a walkway or a bridge of sorts. We have, your Lord, hopefully your copy will have certain stickers on it. And just to orientate you, before I return to Mr. Savage, the yellow sticker on the bottom wing of portion 2 is where Mr. Savage believes 1026 is situated. Mr. Savage, I see because there seems to be numberings on this one. Would this be a helpful plan in which you could advise the court how you were able to...
numberings, what do you mean by numberings?
Well, measurements perhaps.
Measurements,
In terms of calculating where that room 1026 would have been.
My Lord, if you refer to the bottom of this thing, it has got grid lines, what we call grid lines. And those grid lines set out where the grids are then located. And there's a dimension line running along the southern part of the building that gives the dimensional spacing of that grid. And this goes 9 foot 9 inches continuously all the way along that building right the way through to the other side. So that gives us some indication of what the size, the scale of that building is.
Thank you, Mr. Savage. My Lord, if you look at the northern wing of the 9th floor, we have marked, for your convenience, certain important features. So, for example, we have marked out the lifts that we believe certain of the witnesses would have used, such as Dr. Essop. And then the next sticker down is the office, we believe, of Colonel Greyling. If one were to read the actual plan, it says soundproof room. So it would be the first soundproof room on the left. Witnesses such as Dilshad Jetton and Dr. Essop testified that they were taken initially to those offices, or that office. And further down that corridor, there are 2 stickers. The top sticker is pasted over a room called the strong room. And my Lord, we believe that to be the strong room in which Dr. Essop was tortured for days on end. And the bottom sticker depicts the bathroom. If one reads underneath, it says Eurostaff male cloaks. And in Dr. Essop's testimony, he referred to that particular bathroom. To the right of the strong room is the stairwell. And the stairwell, of course, also features in the evidence, both on the 9th floor and the 10th floor. Mr. Savage, unless there's anything else you would like to draw the court's attention, we could move to the next bit.
That's fine.
All right, so now we can move, Your Lordship, and if we can ask you to jump to M10. And M10, Your Lordship, is a smaller plan, thankfully. Mr. Savage, I think you need to help us with the orientation here, because you explained to us in consultation that the orientation here has to be carefully highlighted.
in the top right-hand corner of this plan, there's a thing called a location plan. I don't think it's detailed as that, but that location plan gives where this plan is located on that plan, which is then cross-hatched. But when you look at this plan in relation to that plan, you'll see that the two have been positioned contrary to each other. In other words, they sit at 90 degrees to the other, which is contrary to how we would follow through on a drawing convention.
So
that
is that why you've turned this plan on its head?
Correct. In order to understand the relationship of that plan to the rest of those other plans, this would have to be turned through 90 degrees to understand its relationship to these other plans.
And helpfully, Mr. Savage, that bird's eye view plan in the top left-hand corner, which seems to have the main buildings in the entire John Vorster Square complex.
Correct.
It sets out the different buildings. And Your Lordship, we want to point out to you where the cells were located. So if you're looking at that smaller view of the entire John Vorster Square complex, you'll see that the cells are in the block that's to the top right. To the left are the single quarters. Directly underneath the cell section is the building for the uniform branch. And to the left of the uniform branch is the building for the CRD. And directly under the CRD is the building which I believe it says personnel. And it's that personnel building that the security branch came to occupy the 9th and 10th floors. Mr. Savage, at the bottom of this page appears to be a big stamp. It says, as built. Can you explain to the court what does that mean?
When a construction process goes through a period of construction, it reaches a point of finality and completion. At that point, what happens is that the professionals then go and do an inspection of the building and then say what has been drawn is now built. That's how it gets the title as built. That is then confirmed as built and gets put onto record in this case, the Public Works Department to keep that record available for inspection.
So because of those prominent words, as built, you're satisfied that this depiction of the 10th floor would have been the structural arrangement, or at least the floor plan, as it was in 1971?
Correct, but I must just say, without an in loco inspection, from my point of view, I cannot say definitively yes to that question.
Yes. Well, luckily, the court has conducted an inspection, and I was present at that inspection, and it appears to me to reflect what we saw at that inspection, but of course it's a determination that the court will have to make. Can you point out certain features? Let's start with room 1026. So can you just describe where you're pointing, Mr. Savage?
Sorry, that 1026 that has been referred to is this one highlighted with an orange sticker on it, and it's a single office, call it, with a single door and a window wall that then sits on the southern face of the building. And I think that the width of that room was about 2.7, 2.6, I think, in the end. Is that correct?
Yes, we had one expert measure it at 2.6.
2.6, yeah.
But you have indicated in consultation that 2.7 would take it to the middle of the concrete. To the
center line of each of the subdividing walls.
Correct.
Between each space.
But the space in between would be approximately 2.6 meters.
Correct. The free space, yeah.
Yes. And could you point out where the bathroom is, which I believe is one of those stickers?
It's the blue section up the top here. there's a bathroom there coming off a passage, with access off a passage.
And my Lord, you will recall that in the evidence of Dilshad Jetham, she spoke about spending time in that particular bathroom. Mr. Savage, there is another room that is next to the bathroom, just to the right of it. Can you point that out?
Which is the pink highlighted sticker.
And can you just describe what that room would have looked like, its features?
It has got no windows. It has got one door, and all four of the walls that enclose it are of a 230 size wall. In other words, it's a double brick wall. So in other words, it's very thick walls. Yes. Running all the way through, on all four sides, except possibly for the one side onto the passage. But I doubt that. I probably think that would also
in fact, and perhaps the next plan might illustrate it better.
Yes.
Today it's used as a storeroom. It's not clear to us what it was used in those days, but on the left-hand wall at the top, there were some smallish windows running along part of that left-hand side.
You want me to point that out?
If it's evident.
My Lord, can you see that?
Yes, I think the court recalls that. All right, unless there's anything else for this particular exhibit, I think we can move on. And now we go back to M9, Your Lordship. And Your Lordship, this is also a depiction of the 10th floor, but this time it includes the two wings. This particular plan is dated 19 February 1997, but the structure of the building appears to be the same.
Correct. This particular plan is called a lighting and power plan. In lieu of not having the actual plan, we said, what is something that represents the 10th floor as we would believe it to be? And that would have been exactly as the plan would have been.
Yes. So let's start with the southern wing. We've already pointed out where room 1026 is, so we don't need to revisit that one. But there is a room that is in the right-hand corner of the southern wing called the strong room. Would that have been what appears to be quite a large vault?
Correct. That's a common name for a vault or a strong room. In other words, you're keeping things under tight control. And then then there are no windows in that room at all.
Yes, that's correct.
Only one access door, and that gives access from an adjacent office.
Yes. And this plan also, we have stickers that mark out the locations we have referred to in Plan M10, namely the storeroom and the bathroom. And my Lord, that storeroom we believe to be the room identified by Mr. Paul Erasmus as the Waarheidskamer, or the truth room.
That's wrong. The one.
This one here, my Lord. It's this one here, this strong room here.
Yeah. So, my Lord, the strong room is in fact part of the office. It would have been 26, 25, 24. So it would have been part of Office 1024. And in fact, we did visit 1024 and took a peek into that strong room or vault. during the inspection. My Lord, I should add that at this stage we do not have testimony from any witness of any events in that particular strong room, but because of its close proximity to room 1026, we just wish to point that out to you. The Waarheidskammer, or truth room, referred to by Mr. Paul Erasmus in his evidence, is that room that is titled store. So it would just be underneath the bathroom. And then, my Lord, we've also highlighted with a sticker the one set of lifts in that southern wing. And you can see that there are 4 lifts depicted there. And then moving...
Sorry,
yes.
Just hang on, I just need to point out, because I was pointing to the wrong thing. There are 4 lifts in the southern wing. They sit there like that.
That's right.
Okay.
And perhaps moving across to the northern wing, if we can call it that.
There we go.
Perhaps you can point out the lifts in the northern
2
wing.
other lifts.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, my Lord, during the inspection, we also pointed out to you that next to those lifts, there appeared to be a secured area. There was a short corridor with officers leading to the left and right of that corridor. And just as you stepped out the lifts, you were confronted by a steel gate as well as a vault door. And then walking through that small corridor, the other side was also protected by what appeared to be a vault door. So in fact, that entire section was a secure section, and perhaps it's no coincidence that the top section there is referred to as security section, and then the bottom 2 offices are called soundproof rooms. My Lord, if we can then ask you to cast your gaze to the right-hand side of that northern wing, to the stairwell. My Lord, it's important to point out that stairwell because that's where Dr. Essop in his evidence said that he sustained a particularly severe form of torture, namely security branch members picked him up and hanged him over the edge of the stairwell, 10 floors up, holding him by the ankles.
Where is that now?
So
It's here where this pink sticker is.
Oh, yes, I see.
Mr. Savage, is there anything else that you wish to draw the court's attention to on this plan?
Wanted to see if the dates on these plans. This plan was done on the 19th of the 2nd, 1997.
Yes,
That's kind of puts it into a time scale.
that's right. But as you've testified, structurally, this does represent how it would have looked in
Correct.
71.
Correct.
My Lord, if we can move to the final plan. And the final plan, which is Exhibit M11, and luckily this plan, which depicts the roof of this section of John Vorster Square, it is dated November of 1961, and apparently certain adjustments were made in May of 1964 and August of 1964. And my Lord might recall from the inspection that we alighted certain stairs in order to access the roof from the 10th floor. And my Lord will recall that it was very accessible. One simply had to walk around the corner from room 1026 up the stairs, and we'd have to consult the other plan to see where it was, but it looks like it was just beyond the bathroom that we have been referring to. And perhaps, Mr. Savage, you can point out on your map where those stairs are.
The stairs here, highlighted in blue.
And it appears that these were the European stairs, and there were non-European stairs on the other side of the building.
Correct.
If we can now turn to the roof area, and it seems that that roof area was quite accessible by simply turning right and then accessing the roof. There appears to be, if you can point out what appears to be the actual roof section, and then what appears to be a pathway around the roof, and what appears to be a parapet, and to the best of your ability, describe them.
The parapet around the edge of the building then determines the edge. That was a particular kind of way of finishing off a building in a way, rather than having, in a conventional way, having a roof overhanging the building like you would in a domestic situation. This being the building that it is, had a pitched roof but set back from the edge. The way that the architects have then provided access to the rest of the roof, in other words for inspection or for whatever, is that they've provided a walkway around the edge of that building all the way around. So you can then get to various parts of the roof where there might be maintenance problems or other types of problems that you would need to address. Rather than bringing cranes and things into it, you could easily get from the access that was being spoken about onto that roof very easily and do that maintenance.
So, Mr. Savage, it would have been quite easy to have walked around the roof. There was a sufficient path to do so.
Correct.
In order to more or less access the positioning where you have placed a sticker indicating where room
Correct.
1026 is.
It's about 900 millimeters wide, or 90 centimeters wide.
Yes.
So it's the normal kind of corridor width that would be in any building. Passageway.
And in fact, if I can refer the court to volume F, I don't know whether you wish to take a look as well, Mr. Savage, but from photograph 82, all the way, with quite a few, all the way to 122, there are numerous photographs that depict that walkway, the roof itself, certain views, and indeed the parapet.
Sorry, just on which page would that be?
I have to apologise that the pages are not numbered, but the photographs are. I think Nasima can help you to get to photograph 82.
82. Okay, there we go.
And actually,
that's fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
And while we were on 82, you'll see that some of these photographs do have people in. In fact, that 82, you can see the parapet and two persons standing next to the parapet, which will give you a sense of how high that parapet, or how low it might have been.
Next page. Just hang on a second.
So that's the first photograph, 82.
That is 82. There are two people standing over there looking through a window. Yes. As to the height of that
and parapet. On the other side of the window, on the edge of the roof, there are two people standing.
There.
Not so far from the parapet. And unfortunately, we don't have any other type pictures to give you a sense of dimension. In fact, we do. If I can refer you to photograph 108. My recollection is that photo 108 was more or less taken from where rim 1026s. So could you give the court an estimate as to how high that parapet is?
It seems to be about sort of hip height, which is like 700, 800 millimeters high, or 80 centimeters high, 70 centimeters high,
Yes.
70 to 80 centimeters high.
Yes, actually my recollection, at least if I were to think of my own size, is that it was lower than my hips. I felt quite insecure up there, actually.
Correct. I was just going to say that doesn't look very safe, that height, the height of that parapet, my lord. Looks quite frightening, actually.
Mr. Savage, is there anything else that you want to bring to the court's attention in relation to this plan?
No, that's basically it. Thank you.
My lord, no further questions.
On any of these plans, is the windows depicted?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
On any of these plans, is the windows depicted of this building or not?
There are, but I mean, well, do you want to have a look at them?
No, it's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Albert.
Thank you. That is yours.
My lord, is Mr. Savage excused?
Yes, yes. I said thank you.
Very much, my lord.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Savage. You're excused.
Okay.
My lord, at the court's request, we have prepared certain documents with photocopied photographs of certain members of the security branch from that period, the period in which Mr. Timol was detained in John Foster Square, October of 1971. Now, I'm advised by my learned junior that these photo albums are already with you. They're marked N1, N2, and N3. I just want to confirm, my lord, that that you have those photo albums.
I have N1, N2, yes, and N3.
Do we have? So, my lord, if I may formally, with the leave of the court, enter these into the official record. We've marked the first document N1, and it is titled Uncaptioned SB, that's Security Branch Officer Identity Photo Album. In other words, my lord, the photos attached to this album do not have any names marked. The second album is marked N2, and it is titled Index to SB Officer Identity Photo Album. And this particular album does have names marked on the photographs. And then, my lord, the final album is titled Secondary SB Officer Identity Photo Album, and it is marked N3. My lord, just to give you some background as to how these were compiled, when my lord made the request we approached very helpful staff at the South African Police Service, and we made copies of photographs from the member files where they were available of potentially relevant security branch officers. So that would be the photographs depicted in exhibits N1 and N2. The exhibit N3, the secondary SB officer identity photo album, my Lord, there you had requested the witness, Dr. Esop, to compile photos from his records as well as available newspaper articles, and that is that particular document. My Lord, we have two witnesses who are available to engage in this, what we might call a photo parade or a photo ID parade. That is Dr. Salim Esop, as well as Dr. Dilshad Jetham. And, my Lord, what I'm proposing to do is that we provide the witnesses with the uncaptioned identity photo album and ask them to see if they are able to identify the photographs in that album. If the court is of the view that that is an appropriate procedure, then we can commence with Dr. Esop.
You want to say something, Mr.
Sorry, my Lord, I was under the understanding that we agreed to this morning that the photographs of Mr. Els and Mr. Rodriguez will be removed from these albums. The album that I've been provided with, those photographs are still in the albums, my Lord.
My Lord, I have to apologize. That's an oversight on our part. May I beg leave for an adjournment of 5 minutes to remove those photographs?
And it's late in the day. We'll have to move faster because the witnesses are here.
Yes.
Please.
My Lord, these two witnesses are attending court every day, and if the court prefers, we can call them tomorrow morning just before the final witness, Mr. Kaji.
Will you be able to remove this because I have them as well? If you could remove them from all the documents, I don't know how long that's going to take.
Yes, we will take back your copies and remove them.
Yes, how long are they going to be on the stand?
My Lord, it's difficult to predict how long this... Are you asking how long will it take to remove, or how long will the evidence take?
Oh, perhaps let me put it this way. How many witnesses do we have tomorrow? I know of one.
We only have Mr. Kaji.
Yes. Can they do that tomorrow morning?
Absolutely, my Lord.
Before we hear Mr. Kaji. Dr. Jetham, will it be in order if you come in tomorrow to identify this? Yes. And Dr. Esop? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Then let's do it tomorrow so that you prepare the documents properly. And
As the court pleases.
as we discussed.
My Lord, we then have no further witnesses for today.
Pardon?
We have no further witnesses for today.
Yes, these will be the three witnesses to complete this. We'll take an adjournment until tomorrow, 10 o'clock.
So, right.